January 15th, 2005. The beginning of the Opilio crab fishing season. 250 boats head into the Bering Sea to the fishing grounds 300 miles north-northwest of Dutch Harbor, Alaska. On board the 137-foot Lady Alaska, Captain Peter Liskey hears the Coast Guard over the radio. An E-perp was going off, and there was no response from the boat that it came from. Liskey tries to contact his partner boat, the 92-foot Big Valley. There was no answer. The Big Valley was carrying 6 men, Captain Gary Edwards and 5 deckhands. They were never seen again. Valley was owned by Captain Gary Edwards and was based in Kodiak, Alaska. Edwards was an experienced captain on the Bering Sea, and his crew of 5 deckhands were also fairly experienced. The Big Valley was, by all accounts, an unassuming member of the massive Alaskan crab fleet. It wasn't massive, like the 155-foot Wizard or the 166-foot Fierce Allegiance. Nor was it small, like the 58-foot Lucky Lady. The boat was not known for its massive capacity, size, or anything else for that matter. In fact, at this point, its main claim to fame was its appearance in the pilot of the Tom Beers Discovery Channel docudrama reality series Deadliest Catch. Edwards, an experienced Bering Sea fisherman, explained the use of the emergency position indicating radio beacon, a device used to find a boat if it was claimed by the Bering Sea. The Big Valley was an experienced boat. One deckhand, Josias Lunas, had made a video log of his time aboard the ship, filming daily operations, massive Bering Sea waves, and other boats, like the Rosie G and the American Star. But by 2005, many of these boats were nothing but ghosts, wrecks lying at the bottom of the Bering Sea. The 2005 Opilio season was set to be the last season of derby fishing. The Alaskan crab industry was about to be rationalized to make it safer, if only marginally. Under the new system, each boat would get a quota of crab to catch based on its size, and thus the boats could fish at their own pace. Under the derby system, a total aggregate fleet quota of about 19 million pounds in 2005 was set, and once the season opened, boats could haul crab pots and catch crab until 250 boats had caught this quota, and then the season ended. Fishermen had to haul as much gear as possible in order to put on as much crab as possible and make as much money as possible. The king crab season the previous October had lasted only 80 hours, and the Opilio season was estimated to last about 5 days. This didn't leave a lot of time to make a fortune on snow crab gold. The boats often partnered up as a result in order to get on the crab faster and get as much gear soaking as fast as possible. The Big Valley would partner up with several boats in a fishing group, including the 137-foot Lady Alaska, captained by Pete Liskey. Another group included the boats Maverick and Cornelia Marie. The Lady Alaska and Maverick both had film crews aboard for the first season of Deadliest Catch. As the fleet set out, the Lady Alaska suffered an electrical malfunction and was forced to return to Dutch Harbor or risk a fire and the same fate as the American Star and the Galaxy. The Big Valley continued to the fishing grounds. The boat had a large superstructure aft of the wheelhouse that took up a great deal of real estate on the aft deck where the pots were held, and thus the ship could only carry around 30 800-pound pots. This was not uncommon. Unlike boats like the Northwestern and Wizard, which could carry 250 pots or more, smaller boats had to make do with less. Boats like the Lucky Lady had an option to store extra pots off St. Paul Island. Others would carry more pots than they were rated. Despite Coast Guard spot checks, this was common. The Coast Guard spot checked several boats to ensure they weren't carrying too many pots and threatening their own stability. The more weight on the boat, and the higher it was, the less stable the boat would be. The less stable, the more likely it would roll in the waves, and the Bering Sea is notorious for its waves. These waves in January would also cause freezing spray, and boats could build up to 8 inches of ice in 24 hours, adding up to several hundred more tons of weight to an already precarious boat. Boats in extreme conditions could be forced to suitcase their pots or abandon them over the side with their lines and buoys inside them, losing them to the Bering Sea forever in order to stabilize their boats, trading $25,000 in gear for the lives of their crew. The ice and stack of gear was responsible for the most common cause of sinking on the Bering Sea: capsizing. The more gear stacked on a boat, the more ice it could make, and the more weight was brought on board, and the higher it was. It created a compounding effect that could very easily sink a ship. The 126-foot Northwestern, captained by Norwegian fisherman Sig Hansen, raced ahead of the rest of the fleet to its chosen fishing grounds near the Russian border, more than 100 miles away from the other crabbers. The Big Valley was among the rest of the fleet, about 70 miles west of St. Paul Island. Its partner, the Lady Alaska, was not with them. It had returned to Dutch Harbor with electrical troubles. When it sailed out on Saturday, January 15, 2005, Captain Pete Liskey, Sig Hansen, and the rest of the fleet heard the sound no fisherman wants to hear: a Coast Guard report of an E-perp going off, and no response from its owner. The boat the Coast Guard described was the 92-foot Big Valley. Captain Liskey immediately called upon his faith, praying that Captain Edwards was out there and that his E-perp had fallen overboard, as had happened before. Then he called the Big Valley, and his heart sank. On board the Northwestern, far away from the fleet, Sig Hansen was listening to the radio, and the one voice he didn't hear was that of Captain Edwards. While the Northwestern and Lady Alaska were too far away, the 92-foot Maverick was within 10 miles of the last known location of the Big Valley, and Captain Rick Kwasnick immediately stopped his preparation for fishing and started searching. As time passed, a search party formed around the area. The 92-foot Maverick, the 128-foot Cornelia Marie, the 87-foot Sea Rover, the 152-foot Alaskan State Trooper vessel Stimson, and the 378-foot Coast Guard cutter USCGC Sherman, alongside a Jayhawk helicopter from the Coast Guard station Kodiak. But despite the search grid, there was no sign of the Big Valley. Deadliest Catch crew filmed the search from the wheelhouse of the Maverick and the Cornelia Marie, and filmed the reactions of Captains Rick Kwasnick and Phil Harris as they scoured the ocean looking for any sign of the missing boat. Not long after dawn, they found it. They came across discarded bait buckets from the Big Valley floating on the current. If there was any doubt at the fate of the ship, any hope that the Big Valley would come heaving over the horizon, it was dashed. Now a countdown began to find the missing crew, now in the frigid water, before they succumbed to exposure. The message of the fate of the ship spread through the fleet like a wildfire. Fishing was now the last thing on their minds. For the Northwestern, all they could do is prepare their gear, being too far away from the sinking to offer any help. On board the Maverick, Captain Rick and the rest of the search party, their sodium lights strobing through the misty morning, continued to search for their shipwrecked brothers. A life raft was spotted by the Coast Guard helicopter with a man in it. A rescue swimmer was lowered into the water and plucked the sailor from the raft. The man, 30-year-old deckhand Cash Seal, recounted the final moments of the vessel. The boat was listing at 45 degrees when Cash was thrown from his bunk, which quickly increased to 90 degrees. Water swamped the deck. Captain Edwards and two others were not able to get into their survival suits, neoprene wetsuits meant to protect shipwrecked sailors from the elements. Seal, along with deckhands Danny Vermeersch and Carlos Rivera, did get into their survival suits before being thrown into the water. The boat sank at night, and by the time Seal recovered, several hours had passed, and the search for the captain and his two deckhands was canceled. The two men were still in the water and had a chance of rescue. Edwards and Luna were thrown overboard trying to release the small life raft. Vermeersch released it, but was unable to reach it. Seal was in the water for 50 minutes before he could make it into the raft. While Seal recounted his harrowing tale, the Coast Guard helicopter spotted another survival suit. Their rescue swimmer descended the wire and made a grim discovery. 33-year-old Danny Vermeersch was dead. The body was pulled aboard the helicopter. The window of survival was closing. On the Lady Alaska, Captain Liskey lamented over the loss of a good friend and partner. Liskey prayed for his friend's soul and had to grapple with how to break the tragic news to his crew. Back at the wreck site, Captain Rick on the Maverick was calculating, figuring that a life raft would drift further from the wreck than a person, and that meant that a rough calculation of search radius could be made. The search party fanned out to cover the ground. The Stimson came across the last crew member, 35-year-old Carlos Rivera, dead in his survival suit. With that, the search was called off. Every man had been accounted for. The 2005 Opilio crab season would claim one more life. A man fell overboard off the ship Sultan. In total, the Bering Sea claimed 6 lives and 1 boat before it gave up its bounty. But for the fishermen who claimed it, the catch was bittersweet. Coast Guard reports following the disaster found that the Big Valley was carrying far too many pots. It was carrying 50 at the time, 20 more than it was supposed to be. And thus the Coast Guard concluded the ship capsized. The loss of the ship is documented in the first season of the Discovery Channel series Deadliest Catch. In trying to come up with the appropriate words to end this video, I find myself at a loss. And so, I'll quote Mike Rowe in his narration. As the fishing fleet continued on into a new era of fishing on the Bering Sea, the Big Valley joined the long list of ships that are now only ghosts.